Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome to the first episode in our New Mexico Women in Film series, The Storytellers. I am your host, Carrie Rose O'Connell. I am both a member and the administrative assistant for New Mexico Women in Film. I'm a marketing manager here to provide those early stage development marketing support for film and media. And so that's kind of my role in the industry. The reason we decided to produce this series is because our new board that came on in 2020 really wanted to improve the way we focus on the projects our members are actually putting into development and out into the film and media world. They have a lot of great stories to tell. We have a lot of brilliant filmmakers in the state of New Mexico, and our role in the film industry across the world is just really starting to blossom. So even though we're all off production and at stay-at-home orders right now, many of our members are still actively working on their projects. They're developing them, they're editing, they're doing post-production, and getting them ready to really provide insight and a lot of context to cultural, social, and dynamic issues that affect humanity that often aren't told out of big studios. So that's kind of the premise for our new series, The Storytellers. We'll be doing multiple episodes that will drop with the various groups of members and projects that we have in our organization. Today, I'm excited to have our first guest join us, who is Dr. Laura Marsh, who has brought her project across the Amazons, as well as her documentary about her own trip through the Amazons to us today, so that we can talk a little bit about her project in film and also her documentary work and her experiences and what brought this story into her creative mind. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So let's kind of get into it across the Amazons. Again, like I mentioned, you have both a documentary about your own experience, and you also have a film that's a multimedia platform project called Across the Amazons. That's about another great woman in history. And if I want to pronounce her name correctly. Is it Isabel Godin?
In English, we would say that. In French, because I think it's French, it's
Uh-huh.
probably Godin.
Godin. Okay.
But
So,
I mean, for English speakers, I almost always say Godin.
yeah, we'll go with that for now,
Yeah.
Isabel. But so you have a great true story of Isabel and a treacherous 5,000-mile journey. Um, I took a look at your project's website and I was fascinated about how this is all unfolded for you. And I really have to share before I ask you too much about this project. For me, as I looked at the Across the Amazons website, which is acrosstheamazon.com for everybody, I really felt a sense that this is kind of a story that takes you almost like a hero's journey, not just through the hazards of the environment of the Amazon, but almost the hazards of humanity in some ways. So I'm just fascinated by this story, your own experiences in your documentary. So I have a lot of really great questions that I hope you'll be able to answer for us
I hope I can answer them all.
today. So let's start with your own adventure through the Amazon. As I don't know if I mentioned at the top, but you're both a writer and a tropical ecologist. Is that correct?
True.
And so you had your own adventure into the Amazon for science. And so I'm wondering, how did Isabel's story and your own adventure there kind of unfold in your world?
So, I'm a big deconstructor. It's one of the
Sure.
things. Make sure we kind of go back a little bit. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
actually, I've worked in over 30 countries now. And I started back in the 1980s, really working in the tropics, including the Amazon, but in Africa and in Central America. And I ran across Isabel's story when I was in graduate school at Washington University in St. Louis back in the 90s. And it was just amazing to me, right? That this woman in the 1700s, so 1769, in her petticoats and all her stuff, goes schlepping across the Amazon to meet up with her husband, who she hasn't been with in 20 years. And anyway, and as that story unfolded, and I was reading about her in history, it was amazing. A friend had given me her book, and it never left me. And
Wow.
I've always been a fiction writer. I really started leaning into screenwriting late 90s, early 2000s. helped run the Santa Fe Screenwriting Conference here in
Oh,
town.
great.
Yeah, for years. So met lots of great folks in the industry and so forth. But because I'm also a scientist, had kind of this work, thing going on in my world where, sometimes I'm running off to the jungle and sometimes I'm actually writing a thing. So the most recent expedition that I did is called Houseboat Amazon, and I did it intentionally with a logo and tried to do this real forward-facing internet kind of presentation. We tried to do it as live as possible.
Yeah.
We were going in the Amazon. This was in
Wow.
2017. We did it from January to May in a remote corner of Brazilian Amazon. And the main focus was to look for this Saki monkey that hadn't been reported to science in about 80 years, been missing.
Ah,
And the reason why we knew about this is because I had just rewritten what's called the taxonomy, like how you name stuff, basically.
okay. Yeah.
I had redone the taxonomy for this group of monkeys called Saki monkeys, and I had named 5 new species to science. And in the process of even doing that, there was one species of monkey that had dead monkeys in a museum, which is how we do figuring out if things are around still. It's like somebody 200
Right.
years ago or whatever collected these things. So, like 80 odd years ago, 85 years ago, these things ended up in a museum, but I had no living photos, no representation of these guys alive. So then it became, let's go see, let's go find a missing monkey. And let's do it public facing so that people could follow us in real time where we were going. We took drones and camcorders and all this stuff. And we had
Wow.
journalists with us. We had one guy from Colombia who was our drone operator and filmmaker to start with, but not proper filmmakers, really. It was us filming. We ended up with thousands of hours of video and thousands of still photographs, and of course the data for the expedition.
Right.
And we found the monkey, nailed it.
Oh,
So,
yay. Okay.
um, I mean, it was there. It was just one of those things to demonstrate. Look, science isn't perfect, and these
Right.
monkeys are there, but as far as we know, maybe they're not. What's the big
Right.
mystery, and can we find it? And woo, because there are other species that are properly much more missing. You hear about things like uh, Tasmanian wolves and things like this, right? So,
Right.
um, anyway, so that was the expedition most recently, and Isabel, I'd written that story back in early 2000s. I had submitted it to Nichols, and it won as a quarterfinalist. And
Fantastic.
so, okay, I thought that was cool. And then but it's one of those stories that it's a woman in a Latin American lead. It's period. It's rainforest, and it has this multiracial past, including African slaves. Right. So everything gets a little
Ah,
whoa. What do we do? So it was one of those things where, and I'm a woman and an
right.
unknown woman as a writer in Hollywood. So I would take meetings on this or my sci-fis or whatever it was, and the whole litany of BS that you hear from people I've heard. And then
Mm,
also hear the how much we love this. This is going to be this amazing film, and oh my god, and if Isabel does it right, whoever plays her, of course she'll be noticed for an award, and da 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 da. But getting the funding and getting it going has been so hard, because there's that still construct of, you know, what do we really want to see it once it's done, everybody loves it. It's like 12 years as a slave or
yeah.
whatever film,
Yeah.
right? No, 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 nobody wants to see a bunch of slaves. No, 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 it's made, it's genius, it wins a bunch of awards, and everybody's like, oh yeah, we totally would have done that. Okay, right. So it's
Yes.
very interesting from that perspective.
Is
Yeah.
it do you feel like did you feel a sense as you were pitching your project and getting that pushback that there's just a fear of being the responsible voice for the kind of content that showing kind of our history, especially how it impacted multiple cultures?
I don't think so. I think
Mm,
it was really more a dollars thing.
ah,
This is an art film on its
yeah.
nose. And the reason it makes it art, and that's what we're changing in the film industry, it makes it art because it's a woman lead. It's effectively
Mm,
it's basically a castaway, and instead of a volleyball, there's actual people that are, helping Isabel through this trip. But it's yeah, the pushback was always it was a woman lead and a
right.
Latin woman lead. Who's going to be her?
Right.
And you know, it's I don't feel like any. But the only pushback I've gotten, and because we've mentioned it as a musical,
Yeah.
my dramaturge that I'm working with in Atlanta has raised some questions, and we've got to think about it, particularly what's going on right now in terms of racial injustice. It's very to the fore. It's always been there, but in theater, the experience of sitting in a theater when we get to do it again
Mhm.
is having live people in front of you doing
Mhm.
a thing is a different experience than sitting on a varying size screen, even if you're in an audience with a screen versus home and a screen, right? I mean, it's a
Right.
very different
Connection.
connection. You're seeing a live person do a thing. So if a live person dies on stage, it's a much more visceral reaction, right? So we have, because we have African slaves, we also have Quechua slaves, we also have the Spanish and the Portuguese treating indigenous people poorly.
Mm.
But then we have Isabel and her family who don't. I mean, she just basically saw everybody as family, and that's partly why I think this story is amazing too.
Yeah.
But it's history, and so we're playing with, well, do we cast the African slaves as something else? And it's like, but it's history.
Right.
And I get that, as an African American person, if you're going to get a role in a theatrical thing, you'd like to be the hero. Well, you could be. I mean, Isabel could be black. She's a Latin woman. She could be
Mhm.
a black African or a Latin American woman. That's fine.
Right.
None of that matters. But I felt like, because in history, it really makes a difference, because the bad guys, it turns out, are French, white French guys.
Yeah.
The guys are the Africans, the Indians, and the Latins. Well,
Yes.
or less, right? So
Yeah.
that messaging is in there, and so it's an interesting thing. But in further answer to your question, no, I think the pushback has primarily been financial. How are we going to
Mhm.
film this, and then how are we going to make money on it?
Right.
And for me, I mean, we've been playing with this. My reps have been playing with this as well. As a professional tropical ecologist, the part where we film in either Colombia, Ecuador, or Brazil, no big deal. I got
Right.
that. Boom. I can keep everybody alive. I can keep you
You have
from
that
being
experience,
exhausted.
right.
Yeah, no big deal. We can do it cheap because we know people. Da da da. That part's easy, but that breaks the brains of stakeholders and
Sure.
investors, right? I mean, it's like they don't. And also, I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I hate playing that card because in my profession, there's a lot of women. Think Jane Goodall.
Right.
And those girls were part of the reason there's a lot of women in primatology and in field ecology. And we're looked at now. It's the same problem because we're from the United States, so we're paid differentially than men because that's just the deal. Even at the highest
Mm.
levels of science, you're still discriminated against that
Fortunately.
way. That's kind of the deal. But as far as you put your rubber boots on one at a time and you're covered in insects, nobody cares what gender you're hiding under those clothes.
Yeah, I could
You're shopping
imagine.
around out in the forest and nobody's crying about it. They don't care if you're a man or a woman. So
Right, yeah. There's more
yeah,
important things to focus on, I'm sure, at that point.
but that was where that comment came from, is that it's literally easier to pull off an actual modern day research expedition with its
Mm.
challenges and troubles and getting financing and so forth, than actually putting the documentary together for it or the film for it, because you bring in all this other cultural expectation and the need to make money back and da 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 and all the things that are important in a business,
Right.
uh, quite different than science. Science is always considered, well, you're doing this out of benevolence and the good of the world, which is part of the reason we need to change that narrative too. And science needs to be looked at a little differently. But
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, yeah. So that's
Yeah, and although it wouldn't be bad to splash in a little bit of the perspective that film is sometimes benevolent and for the good of the world, you know what I
agreed.
mean?
No,
Right?
it is
Yeah.
agreed, agreed, and
Yeah.
agreed. And I think that's what we want to do with the documentary, because there's so much footage that, yeah, would go into a narrative that we want to talk about. Because
Mhm.
part of what I wanted to do for the public facing portion of the research was, or the narrative is, first of all, who cares about a monkey if it's missing? What does it mean to you on your couch hanging out in COVID? Um, and why does it matter to the world, right? And so
Right.
that's the ability to take people from a monkey that's missing, scaling it up through what it does ecologically, the goods and services it provides the rainforest. What does the rainforest provide you? What does it do in terms of climate? What are we talking in terms of climate change? How does that impact you sitting on your couch? Is being able to draw that whole circle together is kind of what we want to do with the documentary.
Yeah.
All this other side narrative that we would like to have content in these little packaged video casts that students in schools and whatever can use. And no, the
Yeah.
documentaries, we're not expecting to make any money on the documentary, but getting the funding and the grants in the first place to do all of the work because actual editors and actual sound people and actual da 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 need to be paid, right? So
Right.
yeah, it's a
Still
challenge.
a crew on documentary, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's just so fascinating. So, to talk a little bit about more about this adventure and Isabel's adventure and the two of you. Um, so the project ended up becoming multiple platforms, as we've mentioned. So you took the story about Isabel, and you know, I just think for a minute, this fascinating female, like you said, in the 1700s, she decides, I'm going to go connect with my husband again after losing literally all of her children, to various hazards. And she just does it. And it's just an incredible 5,000-mile journey into this treacherous location. So I'm wondering, your own experience in the Amazon, in your work in science, knowing that Isabel went through such an amazing journey at a time that almost it should just seem unheard of for a woman to go and do such a thing. What was it that made you feel that both expressing it in a musical and finding a way to express it through film was important, and kind of that pursuing that multiple platform avenue?
Right. So two things. One is that, because it has such a long, the film version of it has such a long tail at the end of it, right? Because there's been a lot of interest, a lot of people, but not a lot of funding or generation in that sense.
Right.
Um, well, I've been fascinated with Broadway. I'm a total musicals head. My dad, when I was little, used to bring home records at the time. I'm that old that
Yeah, I am
that
too.
that my sister and I would like act out stuff before we'd go see the show because my dad felt it important that we understood what the story was in the music before we went and saw the show because he didn't want to take little kids asking him a bunch of questions during the show.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So we would act them out and we would play these things and and it just really seeped into who I am. It's just important. I met a friend who's a Broadway producer. His name's Ken Davenport. He has a theater on Broadway now. He's been doing he's got this massive goal of getting new writers and new talent to the stage.
Nice.
And I was in New York for another meeting actually, and rang him up, set up an appointment, and went and talked to him. And I said, my pitch was, okay, so I don't have time to do anything. But I wanted to tell you about this story that I have that's a film, and we've been working on it, but it's taking its time. And all he said was, Laura, it's a musical. And I'm like, oh God, all right. So my whole pitch
Here
was, I
we
don't want to do
go.
this. He's like, it's a musical. I'm like, oh, okay. So I mean, I'm the kind of person that even though I'm doing science, or even if I'm in the Amazon and in the forest, I've always been writing stories. Um,
Mhm.
I just had a novel win a literary award, and I'm
Oh,
looking for an agent for my
congratulations.
novel completely
That's
different.
so great. Fantastic.
Right? I mean, so yeah, I'm a busy brain. I like keeping my brain active and doing things,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, it just so Ken's encouragement was good. So then I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And so I got thinking about it. And one of the things that's interesting about the narrative version of a story and then turning it into a musical, the musical gives you the opportunity to really hear that inner dialogue.
Mm,
You get because you're absorbing it, and if you've written it right, you get what they're going through, you get it.
right.
Um, but man, they can really suffer it. And especially if there's any spin to it, right? Then you can get that spin in their songs. And so while I do not count myself as someone who knows how to write music, because I don't, I, I know how to write poetry, maybe, and I know how to write whatever, so I mean, I sort of lyricked out some of the things. And before the pandemic, we've got a couple of people who are interested in helping do musical aspects of it, whether it's themes or songs. We've tried one song, but for me, it sounded too Disney princess.
Ah,
And while that might work on Broadway, Isabel's not a princess, really.
right.
Not that kind of. And I don't mean she doesn't need to be darker, but I just feel like there's more we can do with it than push her
Mm,
to Frozen, basically.
right.
So, in rewriting it from a 3-act narrative film,
Yeah.
where you can just have action words that are then filmed, to a two-act with a break in between. Song structure has been a really amazing learning experience, and I'm working now with a dramaturge where I've mostly got it right. She's like reimagining it now. We got accepted for a reading, the musical reading, to be in the Rave Theater Festival in New York this year. Of course, it's COVID; it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So we're reimagining it now. Like I need it to be one more thing as a radio play, so we can do it online. I don't know about that. But anyway, it's been an interesting experience, and there's been a lot of interesting traction on it in terms of a musical. When in Santa Fe in February or first week of March, the Indigo Girls came to town,
Mhm.
and um, they're really amazing wordsmiths. I'm not convinced that their actual music style as Indigo Girls works for this, but because they're classically trained and they work
Right.
with lots of different instruments and loads of different people, I just went up to them and I talked to their manager and I went up to them and asked them, and they were like, "Yeah, we might be into this."
Very
Enter
cool.
pandemic now, right? So
Yeah.
they're pandemicking and trying to figure out their lives now, but they might, maybe they'll be involved as musical lyricists and musicians as well. So the two things are completely different in their pathways and needs,
Mhm.
and the film people want the film to stand up before the stage goes, right?
Sure.
You
Yeah,
want to be
which
the
one
first
goes
one.
first?
But the stage is like bubbling along, it's got people thinking about it and whatever. So it's an interesting foot race at this point. We do have, for the film version of it, my reps have gone out. I had some meetings with a film company in Ecuador.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I was supposed to be there this year for a conference anyway, of course, COVID.
COVID.
Um, So we did that online, and we found out that once I get funding, if we shoot anything in Ecuador, and I'd like to do, there's a lot of it we'd like to do, because even though she was at the time colonial Peru, it is today's Ecuador.
Right.
Um, they're on board. They're like, yeah, well, I mean, it's about us. We've got cameras, we've got crew, we've got da da da, we've got all this stuff ready to go. You just need to get the funding. Ah, so we're doing a budget with a production company in New York who's going through and doing a proper, movie magic budget sort of thing. Like
Yes.
the aliens landed on Earth, how much does that cost, right? Kinds of line
Right.
by. So once we
Which
have
is
that,
very, I will just say to our audience, couple of points that you've already made that I just want to reiterate. A, never be afraid just to walk up to somebody and tell them you'd love for them to be a part of your project, like you did with the Indigo Girls. That is one of the key ways to make sure you progress. And B, have a proper budget put together so you know what you have to fundraise for. Yeah, I'll let you go on.
hey,
Sorry.
no, no, but all of that is true. And with the
Yeah.
Indigo, I actually, in full disclosure, I randomly figured out who their reps were, called a couple different people, and they were like, "Oh no, you need to talk to da da da," and then wrote an email to the reps and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in town, da da da. I'd like to meet these people." And they just called me back and said, what is this? What are you talking about?" And
Right.
then told them more. They're like, "Yeah, okay," because
Sounds
I'm such a
interesting.
weirdo, right? Because they were doing
Yeah.
a benefit concert for Honor the Earth, which is an
Oh,
indigenous organization in town.
yeah.
Do a lot of tribal rights stuff and a lot of stuff having to do with the environment. And they have one little passage that says they're starting to work on rights of nature, which is something my nonprofit organization, Global Conservation Institute, is
Mhm.
starting to tip into. So I'm like, okay, so I can talk about that. And I can
Right,
talk about
yeah.
it with the call. And it's like,
Yeah, you just need that one little tie-in, and it makes it so
yeah.
much easier to approach, for sure.
Right.
Fantastic. So I'm curious about, so obviously the way it's experienced in a musical and in a film is going to be different for the audience. For you as the creator, did you feel like the story changed at all from musical to film, or did it keep kind of a congruent narrative for you?
So yes and no. The more on the nose answer is, if you looked at something like, if you've ever been at Broadway and seen Hair, for instance, the musical
Mhm.
Hair,
Right.
then you've seen the movie version of the musical Hair. They completely switched the narrative because it works better in a movie to have the hippie get on the plane and fly to Vietnam and get killed than the original guy, than Manchester, England, whatever his name is, Bukowski or whatever. Instead,
Right.
Bukowski actually going on the plane, right? So in the theater version, Bukowski goes and the hippies are sad. In the movie version, it switches and Berger goes, the hippie goes. and gets killed in Vietnam. And it's much more powerful for us
Right.
experiencing that on film than in the original version. We don't have anything quite that dramatic that's different, but of course we have to remove scenes.
Sure.
We have to reimagine how we're going to. There's a moment when in the story and in true life that they're making their her party starts off when Isabel decides I'm going, and her family's like we can't support this, and then finally get on board. She leaves Riobamba, her city in the Andes, with 30 people with llamas and pigs and people on horseback and all her shit that she's taking with her.
Right.
She's moving across the Amazon to French Guiana to meet across petticoats and china and gold and all this crap.
Oh my gosh.
She's carried in a sedan chair, right? I mean, she's schlepped out of the like a queen. So, of course, as you can imagine, in real life and theatrically, this is brilliant. We start losing junk, we start losing people. By the time we get to the first mission, it's actually burning to the ground. And her father had gone in history supposedly and set up, Indians and porters and stuff in each mission system, in the Spanish and Portuguese mission system, uh, food and supplies, all the things that she would need, canoes, whatever. None of
Right.
that. They show up, everything burning to the ground. Done.
No
So they're like,
rations.
okay, shit, and all her people are like, we're out of here. It's the plague. Boom. And they run back to the Andes except for her family. And so there's about 10 in an ensemble. So theatrically, you're not going to have 30 people and porters and llamas and schlepping. And, you've got to figure out,
Sure.
are we doing puppets? What are we going to do about that? Right. So you've got to solve stage problems like that.
Yeah.
And then you have to say, well, is it really the 10 in the ensemble, or can we lose some characters? So, for
Mm.
instance, in the film and in real life, she had two Quechua handmaidens, these little girls that were 8, 10, something like that.
Oh wow.
But for the stage, we roll them together and she has one, right?
Mm.
Or who can we really be without? And then can some of those guys, as they die, as they will, or flee or betray her, which is what ends up happening. She ends up alone in the rainforest. True fact. We think about a month. It may have been
Wow.
shorter, but seriously, a woman of aristocracy, not knowing,
No survival skills really. Right.
and she somehow lit, and then gets out, and then ends up making it all the way down to the mouth of the Amazon anyway on her own chutzpah. Basically, this is what the whole. So the changes are mechanical ones. We have to drop out some scenes that either feel redundant or make the play too long, because now we've got to stop and sing, right? I mean, so you're
Yeah.
not just duty, duty, duty. Okay, oh, gunfight, oh, whatever, and then moving on to the next scene. Fade in
Right.
and out. We've got to schlep things on and off the stage. We've got to figure out who's singing what. Can we have people in the chorus then being different tribesmen, people they interact with, priests, and then they go in and out of the background as cast members and on some. So can you do this with like only 20 people and having people shift in and out and retain your core? So these are the challenges of theater, right?
Yeah.
Because given enough budget and you can hire 50 people to show up on a set as extras, can't do that on stage. And you can't do it
Right.
night, particularly if they're singing. So story wise, not really. But one of the things and it's a great question, because in the musical, okay, in history, we really don't know exactly Isabel's experience. We know she went from A to B, went to the top of the Andes to the mouth of the Amazon. We know a little bit about her adventure, who betrayed her, who made it, her personal African slave Joaquin ends up being one of the big heroes in the thing, and she had always promised him his card of liberty, his freedom. It's one of the few documents in history we actually have, is
Oh
her writing
wow.
his freedom papers. But she made it back to France with her husband and told him the experience and then never spoke about it again. So in history, it's his retelling, and then other authors kind of embellishing, and then my
Mhm.
version of what does she think? Because at the end of the day, how do you be a woman? Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're in love with a man, you've had kids that have all died and whatever, but this dude left you alone for
Mhm.
20 years to go make his fortune, didn't, finally sends a big boat for you, and then you have to decide how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
There's got to be something more than just love. I mean, we pin it on love. We call like the tagline is survive for love, right? And that's certainly a driving force, but she had to have something else in there, right?
Yeah. To
She had
not give up through all of that.
not give up,
Right.
right? So she was very spiritual. So there's a lot of praying and singing to God. There's some of that. But then there's also this, when we get into the musical, I can really play with that internal dialogue of what the hell am I doing? Like one of her first big songs, like the big, I want song is what am I doing?
Mm.
I don't really even know if I remember what this guy looks like, frankly.
Right.
I mean, she's been obsessing about him and like painting him over and over to try to remember what he looked like. But seriously, she doesn't remember what this guy looks like.
And
She
it's
doesn't
been 20 years or something,
You
right?
know, yeah, her daughter dies at 18. He left when she was pregnant, so call it
Yeah.
20, like, 18 years. Yeah, because his original plan was, okay, here, check this out. You guys, I get you pregnant, but I'm done with like your family being wealthy and me being kind of a loser. So I'm going to French Guiana,
Mm.
gonna totally make my way. Then I'm gonna come all the way back. I'm gonna get you and my daughter. And then we're gonna go together. Come on. Some of these expeditions took them a year to get all the way across the Amazon.
Sure.
I mean, we
Yeah.
can boogie it along because it's a story, but come on. He gets there, he gets paranoid about the crown of France versus the crown of Portugal, and I don't know. And then he ends up like manatee hunting and doing useless stuff, right? I mean, then
Yeah.
eventually sends a boat, but he doesn't come because he's too paranoid to get on the boat. So he sends a, Portuguese pirate basically to go collect his wife. Anyway, all these
Wow.
things. But her internal dialogue, when you get to listen to these characters, and I also, it's probably not true in history, but I push it as a possibility, particularly, it's in the movie, but it's definitely in the musical, that her and Joaquin had a very emotional love relationship. It wasn't
Mm.
physical, right?
Right.
But the love transference of her life became Joaquin.
Mm.
He is the one who comes back to try to save her. He's too late. They've already walked into the forest, but um, he's the one. So when he has a breakdown and thinks that she's dead, he comes back to so there's a betrayal by the French physician, Rocha,
Mm.
who upon them falling and they end up in a canoe, they end up capsizing all their stuff into the water. They end up on a little sandbar. And now what kind of thing? Because all of them are like, now what? And his plan is, okay, here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the canoe and I'm going to take he had a traveling companion, which I blow out to be a little more than a companion, but there's not anything really overt with that, but it's there. Suggested. Tried to catch all the diversity of the time almost. And
Yeah.
and he said, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna take my slave. He had his own African slave who's a true stereotypical type slave. He's treated poorly. He's, been aggressive, be the contrast to Joaquin, who is this reflective love interest for Isabel. He's like, we're gonna go, we'll get a complement of Indians to come back and get you. And Isabel's there with her brothers and her nephew, and they're like, yeah, that's not gonna fly. You take Joaquin. So the two French and Joaquin go on down to the next mission, which is several weeks away by canoe, downriver by canoe, leaving the rest of the family on the sandbar.
Wow.
By the time, so, shenanigans ensue, the French basically say, we're good. We're tapping out here. We're good. You
We
go
made
right.
it to the mission. We're out.
We're out. Screw
Yeah.
her. We're not going to go back for her. Screw her.
Wow.
So now it's up to an African slave in a Spanish Catholic mission to get help. And of course, he cannot. And so he is just sent to go find wild Indians that will help him. Eventually, he ends up back to the sandbar with this rescue party. But by then, the family, her two brothers, one of which, I mean, really, you can't be given the gift like this. One of her brothers is a Augustinian priest. So we have a
Wow.
priest with her, as well as another brother who has a nephew who's 7 years old. And Isabel decide, well, I suppose on foot, if we followed the river, we'd eventually get to the mission. So they take off into the forest, leaving behind, in the movie, two Quechua handmaidens and the French African slave.
Mhm.
Like musical, just the one Quechua handmaiden. We don't know in history what happened to them, but by the time Joaquin comes, their bodies are scattered all over the sandbar. It's not a good
Oh,
thing.
wow.
And the family's taken off into the forest, presumed to be dead, because how are you guys going to live? Seriously.
Sure.
So, in the musical version, when Joaquin gets to sing his song, we actually get to hear about that deeper love and connection with
Mm.
Isabel. that you know in the movie, but you hear it from him sobbing on his knees on a sandbar, surrounded in like body parts of these other expedition members, right? So
Wow.
a little operatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's kind of a longer version of, but the differences are definitely there, even though the
Yeah.
entire story is effectively the same.
Has it been do you feel like it would have been easier for you to get your projects move forward choosing just the one, or do you think it actually is benefiting you by having it in both formats as you go through these process of development and funding?
Well, it's been 10, almost 10 years since I won that Nichols Award.
Mm,
So in 10 years, in the last couple years, I just started playing with the musical, right?
right.
We also had it pitched to us that maybe what would be interesting is have it be as a hybrid documentary where you have scripted portions of it and then have real life what's going on
Sure.
uh, in the Amazon today, or what's going on with religion or indigenous people, whatever. And so play that's kind of lightly in the background as well. So I
Mhm.
mean, it could be this, but that's all gotten built out because we're just trying to figure out what spaghetti's going to stick to the wall, to get us some funding so we can get any of this moving.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let me ask a little bit about the lead character as a Latin woman, and then all these other indigenous peoples and cultures that you're reflecting. For you as the creator, whether it be in the musical format, if it would be a merged, docudrama or the actual film, what's important for you as far as how these characters are portrayed and what people gain from learning about our history, as real as it is? Which I think is actually one of the most important things we can be doing right now is not hiding from our history, but just sharing like this is really who we were in that time, and this is how things went down. So, what's important to you as the creator on how these characters are portrayed in however the work ends up coming kind of to full fruition for audiences?
I love that question because I've spent a lot of time really thinking about all of these guys. And as someone, I've worked in Ecuador a lot. I used to work at a Amazon field station out there. That's partly where I encountered Isabel's story as well. I've actually been to. There's a couple of little museums that have a couple little informations about her because, again, real
Wow.
person history, right? So
Yeah.
if you go to Mitad del Mundo, for instance, the actual expedition for La Condamine and the French expedition, who was measuring the equator at the time, they were measuring the equator at the time to answer the Newton's question: "Is the Earth round?" Right? I mean, so fabulous things. And so that's where her husband Jean Gaudin was part of that expedition as a map maker, as a cartographer, and
Ah,
then
okay.
fell in love with our Isabel in real life when she was 13. So we try not to say how young she was,
Right.
but but so I think a lot about these guys and like what it's really like because again, like even going back to that core of you are a Latin woman of aristocracy meaning that her family had some wealth of their own, right? I mean, and we're
Mhm.
living in it was kind of like a Santa Fe, Rio Bamba at the
Oh,
time.
interesting.
Artists, a lot of folks from around the world that were there, including, so she was not unfamiliar. She already spoke French. She already knew how to speak Quechua. In fact, her and her husband in history wrote the first Quechua dictionary. Um,
Wow.
and so, I mean, there's all this cool stuff to know, but you can't do much with any of that, but you have to infuse it. And when we were thinking about this business of doing the docudrama business, it was really clear to me as I was putting, we were doing a lookbook or whatever, and we were putting the slides together. It really became clear to me as I was going through the film script and taking out scenes that now we wanted to look at 250 years later in history. Some of the narrative about women is exactly the same as we are seeing in the Me Too movement. Some of the narrative we're
Mhm.
seeing about how we treat our indigenous and people of color is the same as we are seeing in history. Some of the ways that religion is fantastic and also really can be cruel is very similar.
Mm.
What I want, because the feel of this, there's a movie back in the 90s called The Mission.
Right.
That look of that movie is very similar to this one. It's a very similar time period. That was Jesuits versus Jesuits versus just traders, but it was not, I thought it was another religious group. Maybe it was just the Spanish invaders, whatever. Very similar feel, right?
Mhm.
So I think a lot about those guys as a woman in the Amazon myself, what was going on. And you look, I mean, I don't know how she did it, frankly. I really don't. I mean, because I've worked in the Amazon 30 odd years, whatever it's been. If you drop me off by myself, yeah, I'd be able to figure out the vines that, like, if you cut them just right, you could get water. And I know what things you can eat now and whatever. But I'd be a mess. I mean, I always have like a team,
Right, yeah, equipment.
or guys who know, or local folks who know the area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I climb a tree and get fruit out of it? No, I can't do that. I mean, so, it's like, right. I mean, so anyway, all of that.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing for me, and I think why it's a great film, it's a great story for now, is it shows a woman, not just a woman, she was the first woman to cross the Amazon.
Mm.
Full stop. Now other men had done it, and they'd had teams of men. Like Condamine, when he went, discovered rubber and quinine and all those cool things that one does when you're an explorer. And he went with a guy named Pedro Maldonado, who's a very
Mhm.
famous South American explorer as well. Those cats went across, had a great time, no big deal, learned lots of stuff. Cool. But one of the things that we can show in the movie is the thousands of indigenous people that used to live in the forest areas,
Mhm.
how intact the rainforest was. Now you can basically go to her town in Ecuador, which is, they moved it. Now it's a big city, Riobamba, and Cajabamba is where her village is. But you can drive almost the first half of her
Um,
expedition all the way down, right? There's a road all the way down the Pastaza River Gorge. You can get all the way to the edge of the rainforest. By now, there might even be another one that cuts through and goes further in, right?
mm.
So, I mean, just being able to show, thinking about the differences of where we've come and what we're doing and what's happening. Mount Tungarawa is still steaming. It's a volcano. It was back then. It is now, right? I mean, so some things are exactly the same.
Yeah.
They're quite different. And for me, in these times, even in the last 10 years, frankly, how similar some of the issues were. Um, and then being able to demonstrate this woman just going, yeah, screw you guys, I'm out of here. Come with me or don't. And then,
Right.
and the come with me or don't isn't, I'm getting in my car and driving to California. No, this is like a really different deal, right?
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of messaging. I've intentionally tried to get into it without being on the nose, da da da. And I think it would really resonate with audiences and really want to cheer for someone like that. And that she's a Latin American woman, to me, doesn't, because I work in Central and South America, I guess I just don't even think about that. That's such a big deal, I mean, it's,
Right.
but I guess for American audience, it's such a big deal. And so good. Okay. Let it be a big deal. Let's have that, you
Yeah,
know?
let's start
Eh,
making those kind of characters a big deal. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Whereas the slaves, I mean, it's not other than the French slave who we definitely have, there's a lot of pairs in it. There's the Joaquin, who's basically one of the heroes, and then there's poor Francisco, who is just, basically a kicked upon guy, right? And
Mhm.
then Quechua handmaidens who are surrogates for her children because that she lost, right? Now she has these
Right.
girls that she's taking care of on this expedition, and then her brothers. So we have the priest, right? So we can have the narrative of religion in there. We can have
Mhm.
the other brother who's bringing a son and wanting to make the best life for him, and those guys all die horribly in a rainforest war. She's left alone.
Wow.
The woman lives. The
Yeah.
woman survives. The men lay down and die.
Yeah.
So all of these things. And it's in history. I would have loved to say that I'm a genius. I get, well, thank you well for this amazing life, right? I embodied her and tried to bring her to us, but it's her story, right? I mean, it's amazing,
It
amazing.
really is, and I think one of the, you know, life has that way, on a journey of just stripping everything away until it's just you, and you have to
Right.
decide who you are and why you're moving forward. And obviously, this woman in our history made a very distinct decision for herself. I mean, I would imagine by the time you're stranded alone, you've lost everything and everyone that you arrived there with, that you really do make a choice if you want to live or survive. And you either give in to, succumbing to it, or you say, no, I have some reason that I need to stay on the planet and continue
Sure.
my journey. And so I love that this story helps kind of in that metaphor reveal just how circumstance, environment, humanity, all of it, as you're trying to just make your own way, just will literally, kind of strip you barren. Yep.
Right.
But we often find out the most about ourselves in those moments, right? That's really what
Right.
develops us in our own humanity. So it's just so brilliant. And just to dovetail a little bit into your own personal experience, as a woman filmmaker, as a woman in science, you are too in your own personal journey, I'm sure, faced with a lot of barriers based on bias. And so, how has that been for you, really tackling careers in a way that's so, I have to say, your dedication to really sharing your perspective, whether it be in science or creative storytelling, which are two very different worlds. You're very creative and analytical, obviously. So, how has that been as a woman in those industries, kind of going through your journey?
It's really interesting because so one of the for me, the way I embody science and like literature, let's call it,
Hmm.
is for me, and I do this when I do public narratives, either I'm talking about House, but Amazon or whatever, is for me, it's all story.
Mm,
Scientists tell a story.
yeah,
We start with a question, and you do often when you're doing literature as well, you start with a question, how did Isabel do it? You in science and all of us in our daily living start with a question. Where are my car keys, right? Then you go on an adventure. In fiction writing, we go, look into the research, we write a story, we figure it out. In science, we go on potentially an actual expedition to the Amazon, or we sit in a lab and we sort out what virus is doing. That's an
right.
adventure, right? You try and figure that out. And then you have, at the end of the day, you tell somebody about it. In science, we write journal articles or, whatever it is we do. And in fiction, we write up our stories and try to share it. In our daily lives, we do the same thing. Where are your car keys? It might be a really boring story. It's in the entryway. You don't have anybody to tell, right? But if
Yeah.
you left it on the beach and then you had to go back with like a metal detector and the cute lifeguard and da da da, now you've got a story to tell and then a result. Did you find the keys or not?
Right.
We all process, we all engage in storytelling, we all engage in scientific method every day.
Mm,
So that's in my world how those things fit together. As a woman, it's really interesting because um, my kind of science, the biological sciences, like I said, basically demand you to be kind of a dude, right? I mean, you go out and you schlep around in the dirt, you get covered in, right? I mean, that we think is classically like guy stuff.
right.
And in primatology, in the world that I'm in, that started with Leaky Girls with Jane and Diane and Baruta, right? I mean, the narrative got spun that it's okay for women to be professionals in this field. So we were lucky that way. There's other more charismatic animals like tigers. We have a hard time having women as the head biologist, right? Because it's a guy.
Yeah.
So I have never, other than getting funding, because when it comes to money, you're a woman in the United States and just it sucks to be you. You just have to be 1,000 times better than any man in
Mm,
anything you do.
hmm.
So funding is mixed bag, it depends. For going on something like an expedition, I ended up paying almost half of it out of pocket,
Wow.
and throwing it on credit cards because it came at a time, I don't want to blame the politics, but it came at a time right when the elections were happening and Trump was looking like the de facto guy. And
Hmm.
I blamed it on the funding. It may have been just because I'm a woman and they didn't trust me to do an expedition. I don't know. I tend to not
Right.
think that way, so I don't know. But all of a sudden, all the funding and grants were like, so I just put the rest on a credit card and figured it out later. Um, and in the film industry, it's been a mixed bag because some of my messaging has been really interesting because early on, I go into a room like when I've got friends in LA, right? So I go into whatever studio and go talk to people. I go in because I'm a professional in another world. I go in eye to eye. I'm not,
Sure.
not cowering to these guys. I'm not begging them for a job. I'm a professional in another world. I go in eye to eye. And Hollywood of the past, and perhaps they're getting better about this, isn't used to that from women.
Hmm.
They're used to us showing up in our sundresses and our pumps and being very reverential, and also because that's what guys are looking for, don't want to be completely stereotypic because it's not every man. I work with lovely, lovely men in the film industry. So it's
Mhm.
obviously it's not every man, but it was that vibe.
Sure.
And it was that vibe of, oh, you have really great ideas. And then I even had the opportunity of a guy who was repping me for a while, giving my project away to somebody else to do. And having one of my other colleagues call me and go,
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab these guys because that's your project. So then we had to, then it became, if you kids are going to do this, I'm down with it, but you got to include me.
Yeah.
And ended up dropping it and taking it anyway and rewriting it enough to have two of my ideas go out and be done without me in it.
Mm.
So then it makes you go, okay, am I just an asshole? I mean, so are you, am I an asshole? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because it just, nobody really wants to be with me? Right. I mean, because we're women. So we go, oh God, it's something about
It's
me.
our fault. Yeah, we immediately
Not my fault.
figure
What did
out
I do?
our yeah.
It turns out, my mother's adage that I grew up with is that assholes come in all colors. Well, it turns
Mhm.
out it applies to Hollywood as well. It's not all colors, but all different levels of production. I've had,
Mhm.
I've had meetings with personal friends where they take me out to lunch, and this producer friend of mine years ago, we were at lunch in Beverly Hills, and we're just chatting, da da da. And he's like, "Oh God, I came from this meeting, and there was a couple women in it. I just hate it when the women are in the meeting." And I'm like, "Hello, what are you saying,
Yeah.
dude?" I mean, I act kind of like a dude, right? Because I do expeditions, I get the guy stuff. I'm like a scientist. I've even been told that because my business card, my normal business card, Laura Marsh, PhD, da 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 da, director of blah 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 blah. They're
Mhm.
like, yeah, don't give new producers or studios your card. Why? Because they want to feel smarter than you. Come on, well, they are smarter than me. I don't know how to produce a film. I don't know how to
Yeah.
shoot a movie. I don't know how to direct any of this stuff. I know I like to write things. I like to think I'm sharing good stories. That's not my profession. You guys are the professionals. I'm coming to you as professionals. Do you know how
Right.
to be a scientist and study monkeys? No. So I don't expect you to be like smart about that. Oh, no.
Right.
They don't want you to be smarter than them. The fuck is
Yeah.
that? So that's just little, so
Mhm.
it's, I have always attributed it to, and I do because and I don't know why, but I mean, I attribute it to, I go in like another professional in the room, which is,
Mhm.
I don't know how else to be. I mean, I'm not aggressive. I'm not overbearing. I'm just me. I'm telling them my story, but I'm making eye contact. I'm not in a sundress. And I'm, just kind of like, yeah, show up with a briefcase, right? I mean, and I,
Yeah.
and I've done those things. I've not given the card. I'm not, whatever. And I had a WB guy at one point, we were talking about different projects that I had. Many of them are women leads because I mean, except my novel, which is not it's totally men, but but the typically women leads, and the pushback from those guys is still, wow, if it could be a man. Or for instance, we've
Mm.
got this story that we're going to do. For instance, one of our ones is this little boy has a dream, and it's like, all right, I'm already bored, but yet you're doing that.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
mean, it's the whole gamut, I mean, and I've heard it all kind of, but I also, and I have colleagues who are like, Laura, seriously, if you were doing this, you would have had so many things done by now. It's like, okay, I can't change it. Like, I
Yeah.
could change that now, but it's not, so why? And so I'm hoping some of that's changing. I think what changes it is we now have a budget for at least the feature for Isabel, and we just need the right we just need the first donor. We don't even need the right.
Sure.
We just need the first donor to chuck in some amount of money and
Yeah.
say, "Yep, this is a thing. We're doing this." And then now, because then we can go to actors, then we can go to directors. We've been doing that anyway, but they're all like, "Yeah, this sounds great." Nobody's saying no. They're
Mhm.
just saying, "Well,
Let
come
us
back
know when you get your first investor.
when you have funding. Let us know when
Yeah.
you have funding."
Yeah. Yeah. That first money is that catch 22 that leaves so many independent filmmakers in kind of a constant cycle of um good conversations with potential future connections, but they're always seem very obscure, abstract, nothing's very committal. And so that's a big barrier.
or you turn down. I mean, I did turn down a $2 million offer, and it was because it's not enough to do the whole film, and they wanted to control everything, including the musical and anything else that came out of it. It's like, dude, you only give me $2 million. Forget that. I mean, this is not a
Right.
$100 million project, but two is not going to do it.
Right. Especially if
And
you
you
give over
can't get there.
control.
Yeah, forget that.
Right.
So I mean, you do. It feels stupid to say that, right? And of course, this is not a complete unfunded thing. I've been like do the best I can, like
Sure.
using some money, running out credit cards and whatever. Um, but it's not enough. I mean, we need that first chunk.
Yeah.
You got loads of interest, but you still, even this late in the game, I still get, well, it is a period piece in the Amazon. Yeah, I do. I know.
Yeah.
That's why it's
Yep.
cool.
Yes, I wrote it, quite clear.
I
Yeah.
think go that way. Yeah.
I
That's
like though for those listening though, a couple of that sentiment of a couple of things that you said that's just, A, don't be scared to turn down an offer if it's not the right offer, even though at times you feel almost desperate to get things moving forward and the funding that you need, because accepting the wrong offer is going to put you in a much worse long-term situation than sometimes fighting the patience game and staying with what this project can and needs to be. And then I think that's the other thing is, what I think you've really expressed is just that it takes a lot of determination. If you really want your project to get out there, you have to constantly advocate for it through every no, through every horrible comment that you hear, through every bias that might come up because of who you are or what is in your story. So it's just important to not give up on your own work, I think, and I think that that's something that you're helping demonstrate through what you've been able to share with us today. So definitely thank you for that. You do have some very strong team members helping you with this project, though. I saw on your website those that you've attached to help support you are very strong in their careers. And so I'm wondering if you wanted to share a little bit about the team of support that you've had so far on your project.
Yeah, about the last, it hasn't been 10, maybe 6 years. I met a young documentary filmmaker who was working on an ALS film, and I have one of my best girlfriends has ALS, and so she
Uh,
was in this, and she was talking to me about this company in LA who might be interested in my work. And so I wrote to them and sent it to them, and they immediately said yes, which I mean, again, I have a lot of folks dancing around, but these are folks that uh, it's not a benevolent relationship, right? I'm paying them as my reps, right? So,
sure.
I mean, at some point, I guess they will be able, I hope they will be able to be also paid in the back end with points or something. But
Hmm.
they, it's one of their passion projects too. It turns out they've stayed committed, not just because I'm
Mm,
paying them, because I'm not paying them that much, frankly. I mean, I'm just not.
yeah.
So Tiffany Boyle is a features production packaging person who does loads of stuff and has lots of successes. I'm grateful to say, because mine keeps just chugging along under the seams. That hopefully I'll be a big success, and we can have the poster in her office one of these days.
Yeah.
And then Stuart came on last year, maybe in 2018, because of this potential of having a hybrid series, this doc da da da,
Right.
the TV version of it. He's sort of lightly dancing around the house about Amazon stuff, but not as much. And then I do have legal representation there as well. Then
Hmm.
they're in Beverly Hills, and yeah, no, you feel super fancy and stuff, right? And you go to their office and da da da. But the
Yeah.
mistake, I will tell the listeners, I mean, this is a true mistake of particularly someone like me who didn't go to film school, didn't grow up in the industry. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles, but that's not growing up in the
Right.
industry.
Yeah.
Um, is there's this expectation when you have representation that you just get to sit back and light that cigar and you're all, ooh, my God, yeah, they got it. Boom. Here comes the money. Woo, here's the paycheck.
Right.
That nothing. I mean, it took me a long time actually to realize that that wasn't a thing. I mean, they are doing it, but they're doing it on your direction. I'm the lead producer. You will be the lead producer on your thing until somebody bigger than you, if there's a proper studio or something involved, buy you out. And I'm going to try to stay involved because I'm going to keep people from being killed in the Amazon. But it's something to know is that getting an agent, getting a some kind of a manager or rep doesn't mean you just sit back and lounge in the pool and the money comes rolling in,
Right.
because she'll at you know she I did the research, I looked into talent, I did my wish list, and you can send them to them and then go, yes, I have a personal relationship with him, her, da 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 da, this one doesn't seem quite right, we can't go to that one yet, we need funding from this one, da da da, and then they do that work for you. That's what you're
Right.
paying them, is they're the door openers, right?
Sure.
You still have to do your research, and you still have to know what you want, because they're
Yeah.
working for you, they're literally working for you, as opposed to they're working for you, so they're just going to genius this up and do it on their own. No, I mean, not that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So that's important to know.
Yeah, you still have to be the driving force of your project no matter who is assembled to support you. If you're not that key energy driving it forward, it'll start feeling like it's losing momentum, I bet. Um,
Well, or if you sell it, if you just turn it over the
sure.
whole, then done.
Yeah.
But if not, then yes.
Yeah, if it's that kind of project you want to keep with you, yeah, it definitely needs to be your kind of baby. So, we've talked obviously funding is key support that you need. So, anybody out there that's interested in funding, we're going to have in our episode notes all the ways that you can get a hold of Laura to talk to her about that. Any other type of support that you would need right now that would be important to share with our audiences? As you know, our organization and then obviously our local film community have a lot of resources per chance for post production or things like that. So, anything you want to put out there as far as potential future support you might be calling out for?
Sure. So for Houseboat Amazon, we don't need lots of money. I mean, we basically we've gotten all the way through selects. I've been working with Lightning Wood Studios in Santa Fe, which is an editing group with David there, and then I've been working with Here Kitty in Albuquerque
Great.
with Tor and Cat. And so we're all really committed to the project, but we're at the point now, particularly because we're home. And yeah, we did all the selects and then they got left in the studio and nobody's been able to get to them. But we could have been doing this all this time when we were home. Um,
Yeah.
so, but what we need at this point is we do need even just a small seed of money. The entire budget that would include getting it all the way to go to festival or distribution is like 100K, but I think I've already spent at least 10 of that on these
Mm,
guys. So even if we got like 20K to get started, to like start getting the true package together so we can solicit the Sundances and some of these other grants, because we're at the point now where we have to have a it's even longer than a sizzle reel. We basically need to show what the film is going to look like and
right.
demonstrate that it's a thing, which we can do, but I've got to pay these guys. They're actual professionals.
Right.
So that's definitely something that would be super useful. And we've already gotten in with the film industry or film office here for Houseboat and got that started. For Isabel's story, we're on the verge of having a business plan. We do have a Houseboat business plan. So if anybody wants to see that, we've got that all drafted out with the budget and this is this and that is that. Who are the players right now? And Tor and Kat are also involved in the musical because Kat's a proper musician and she just wants to do a musical so bad.
That's
But
great.
also if there are musicians out there who are
Mm,
interested and want to start playing, because indigos are kind of indisposed right now. I mean, they're in Georgia for God's sake, and Georgia's a hot mess. So I mean,
right.
they've got their own thing and they're doing a bunch of stuff right now. They can't do concerts, which is something they were trying to do, so they're doing a lot of online stuff. So okay. But anyone who's a songwriter or musician who can hear like I do the African, South American, plus clavichord French, Baroque music in this thing.
Mm,
If you want to come play with us, let's have that. But I can't pay
that'd be
you.
great.
That's for free. That's just for fun. But let's start playing with that, because then the more we build that out, the more we have a pitch packet for musicals, and we can go to producers for that funding as well.
Sure.
But then on the film side of things, yes, once we have a business plan, if anyone of any amount of money at this point or wants to be a producer that is a proper producer that is interested in working pro bono right now, but we will contract the crap out of that and make sure that you get paid when there's money.
Hmm.
I would be happy for additional help and dovetailing with some of the folks that we're already working with. So,
Fantastic.
yeah,
Great. So you
yeah.
guys all heard that. Make sure you reach out, contact Laura because there's a lot of great opportunities to be attached to this project. And so, anything else about your work or your project or New Mexico film or anything of that nature that you would like to share with our audience before we wrap up today?
I think that I think one of the bonuses about being in New Mexico is that, yeah, I mean, sure, we're Tamale Wood, I get that. But I think that because we do have so many talented people, new and older, professional, well established folks, that certainly during this time of sequestration, if you're a student, get yourself a membership with Women in Film, man or woman, doesn't matter.
That's right.
um, be able to mine through the group of people to be able to see who's there and cold call them. You don't have to know who these people are. I've had people cold contact me that have become really great friends, both in science and in theater. It's really
Hmm.
Santa Fe and in New Mexico, in particular, the northern scene, and of course with Las Cruces down south.
Right.
Mark Madoff was a dear friend of mine, and he and I did a little project together. And there's just you don't know unless you ask.
Right.
You will you will you will you will not hit every ball you don't swing at, right? I mean, so just do it. And I know it feels nerve-wracking and creepy and whatever. Just do it. Because the
Right.
worst that can happen, if you get it in your head, the worst that can happen is they say no. Well, then you're back to no. I mean, then you're back
Yeah.
to where you were. I mean, just do
Yeah.
it. But if they say, yeah, that sounds really interesting, I might like to work with you. Okay.
And you never know, it might not lead to something with that project, but it opens up other doors for you. I remember sitting in one of our events, a brown bag lunch and learn, with one of our hosts that had talked about the festival circuit. And while this one festival that she went to didn't lead to anything for her short film, it opened up a huge opportunity for her to work with a production company out of California on an opportunity that she, enjoyed greatly. And so, she encouraged people, just, you never know. I
Never
always
know.
like to say my own coin of it is, I never wait for opportunity to knock. I like to knock on doors and ask if there's any opportunities in
That's
there.
great. Hi, is
Hello,
opportunity in there? Hi.
I'm looking for some
That's a great point.
opportunities. Yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
Conferences are truly important, and there's a lot of online film festivals that are starting to happen now.
yes,
And so, if you're someone no matter where you are in your career, particularly if you haven't started building out a group of people to know, so it may seem cost prohibitive. Some of these are like $100 to get into these conferences or to
right.
get into the film festivals. Stick it on a credit card and figure out how to pay it later, because it will pay you off. Maybe in a very, very long time, if it's my case, but someday it will pay you off. And it just, but if for no other reason, the experience is important. And you know what? I've made lifelong friends in industry that we may or may not work on a project together, but it's always good to have more people that you know and that like you and can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much today, Laura, for sharing time with me and talking about your wonderful work in the world. Um, I will have all the information about your work in the episode notes as we publish this on YouTube. So, everybody keep an eye out for that. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where we'll always make notice of when new episodes of the Storyteller series is live. And then, Laura, congratulations on all of your hard work, your tenacity, and everything you're doing to help kind of influence and share the world with others. I really appreciated getting to connect with you today. And best of luck. I cannot wait to go and either see the musical or the film or stream the documentary on Netflix, however it should unfold. I'm very excited to see more of this. It was a fascinating project that I learned a lot just by my small amount of time discovering it with you.
Well, I super appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.